Hello, I am Colleen, and let's talk about some of my favorite books from this year. When I started getting ready to make this video, I realized that because I read pretty varying genres, it would maybe be a good idea to split these into more than one video. So instead of doing one big, like my favorite books of the year, I'm breaking it down by genre, and this video that you have stumbled upon is the romance genre. The majority of the books I read are romance. I read 75 books this year and 39 were romance, so more than half. I read pretty much across all subgenres of romance. But for this video, my favorites of the year were contemporary, historical fantasy, and paranormal. I didn't have any sci-fi romance on this list. I'm going to begin with contemporary, and the first book I'm going to talk about is Trust Falling for You by Cherish Reed. Now, I read an ebook version of this, so I don't have the physical copy, and I do read a lot of ebook romances, so this is going to be a lot of images in the corner. This book, I'm actually a little biased because Cherish Reed and I are Twitter friends, and I've been following her for years, and I do love everything she writes. So this was the one that came out this year. Trust Falling for You is a contemporary, pretty short novella, and it was like the perfect escape. I read this, I think in February of 2021, and it takes place during the summer. It is a workplace romance, but it takes place outside of the workplace. So we have Yolandra, our heroine, and she is a professor, but she's like the fun professor. Like, she doesn't take life too seriously. She's a little bit of a mess on certain things. And then we have Samuel, who is more of like the strict buttoned up professor. Cherish did bill this as a Leo Virgo romance, which I loved because I love astrology and I am married to a Leo, so I totally understand that Leo energy. And while I am not a Virgo, I am a Taurus, which is another earth sign, so we have some similarities. This is a super fun story where they go on a team building exercise to the woods of Wisconsin, and they have some forced proximity going on. They have to share a room. They have to do all these team building exercises together, and as they do, they find out maybe they don't hate each other and they're not terrible rivals, but maybe they're actually meant to be together. Super fun. Trust Falling for You by Cherish Reed. The second contemporary this year that I loved was Hard Pressed by Kate Canterbury. It's in the Talbot's Cove series. It's book 2. I've never read any of the other books in the series, but I enjoyed this one a lot, so I will probably pick up more. We are following Annette and Jackson, and Annette is a bookstore owner / baker for fun, and she has just had her heart broken by this man who she's held a candle for like her entire life since high school, and then found out he was gay, which was a little bit weird to start with because she clearly didn't know him very well. And Jackson is a new police officer in town. He's like the new sheriff, and he's really into her but hasn't been able to say anything to her yet. We open with Annette hammered because she's so upset that this love of her life is not ever going to be with her, and Jackson trying to get her home. And because of a series of events of her being locked out, can't find her regular key, he doesn't know who any of her friends are to call, she ends up crashing in his apartment and getting very handsy, during which he is really trying to resist her because she's obviously intoxicated, and then she takes off all her clothes and passes out in his bed. He, of course, is a good guy and sleeps on the couch. But their romance begins from there. It was billed as a fall romance. It takes place in August in Maine, so you get that like end of summer feeling. It's definitely like one of those contemporary romances where the angst level's not too high, but it's not really a rom-com. It's just like a good old-fashioned contemporary romance, and I really enjoyed it. Moving on to historical romances, I read 2 really great, like beyond good historical romances this year, and the first was The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe. I have gotten really into Joanna Shupe lately, and this one is the second book in her Fifth Avenue Rebels series. In the first book, we meet this hero and heroine, but I don't think you need to read the first book in order to get their relationship. If you're interested, that one's called The Heiress Hunt, and it's also very good, but I read it in 2020. So The Lady Gets Lucky, we follow Kit and Alice. And Alice is extremely shy, but she's an heiress. And so she gets it in her brain that she needs to become kind of like a siren and come out of her shell so that she doesn't end up marrying someone who's just going to marry her for her money and actually have no interest in her. And that's like her biggest fear. Kit is sort of like a playboy, but like the fun guy in the group of friends, and he is trying to open like a restaurant. This takes place during the Gilded Age, which is like the late 1800s, early 1900s, like pre-World War I, which is kind of like America's answer to the Regency. Like everybody's rich and everything's fun, and it's all on the Eastern Seaboard. So Alice approaches Kit that she wants him to give her carnal lessons, which is a wonderful trope, and Kit doesn't want to until he finds out that Alice is very close friends with the chef he wants to hire for his restaurant. So he agrees that he will give her lessons on how to become a siren if she will put him in contact with this chef. This story is so beautiful. Like, I wasn't expecting to get such an emotional response when I started reading it. There is a lot about their relationships with their parents, which are strained and sad and lovely also. I would really recommend this if you want to read a historical romance that isn't one you're just going to like breeze through, that's really going to stick with you. I definitely give this one 5 stars. But this was very beautiful, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's on a lot of people's best of 2021 lists. The next historical romance that I read this year that I loved was The Rake Gets Ravished by Sophie Jordan. I also read an arc of this, so I don't have a copy of it, but this was so fun. So the premise is that Mercy is a woman from the country, and she's not like a lady or anything, and her brother has gambled away her family's land at this gaming den. So she goes in and she gets herself all like gussied up so she looks like she belongs there, with the intent to steal the deed back to their land. So she breaks into the gaming den owner's private apartments and finds the deed, but then he walks in on her. And she sort of makes a decision whether she's going to leave empty-handed and they're eventually going to get kicked out of their house and off their land, or if she's going to seduce him and then steal the deed. And she chooses the second option, but it's like an amazing night. And when I read this, I wasn't sure if the beginning was going to feel like the payoff you get in romance from like them finally getting together, because they didn't really know each other, but it was written really well, and you definitely are rooting for Silas, the gaming den owner, and Mercy to make it work. After Mercy disappears, Silas realizes the deed is gone, and he goes to find her, and it's wonderful. Moving on to my kind of bridge from historical to fantasy, I read several books in the Highland Magic series by Kerrigan Byrne, but particularly book 6, Highland Destiny, was fantastic. Now, in this one, we're following Camden McKay, and she is the 3rd Banshee sister that we're meeting in this series. And she, at this point, has been a Banshee for a while. Her sisters both got out of their Banshee duties in their books, which came before. But she's still a Banshee. She's still supposed to be working as sort of like a Fae assassin, but she's a Banshee who's never murdered anyone, and she's kind of too sweet to murder anyone. She gets an assignment from her queen, plus from her sister's husbands, that there's this man called the Laird of Shadows, and he's a berserker, and he's kind of terrorizing their land, and he needs to be killed because he's done a lot of really bad things. And it's her assignment, so she goes to kill him, and when she gets there, he's extremely handsome, and she might be in love with him, and he kisses her, and because he's a berserker, when they kiss their mate, they know that that's like their mate. So he realizes that this is like the love of his life, his mate, but that he does really deserve to be murdered. So they decide to spend like an amazing night together, and that she'll kill him in the morning, which I absolutely love that trope. Like, I love you so much. We're just gonna do this for as long as we can, and then I do have to murder you. It was wonderful. As you can imagine, they continually put off her actually murdering him, but it's so fun. It's so hot. Great mix of historical romance and like a ton of magic. 5-star read. And my last recommendation for romance that I read in 2021 is the entire Stay a Spell series by Juliet Cross. This is Wolf Gone Wild is book 1, Don't Hex and Drive is book 2, Witches Get Stitches is book 3, and Walking in a Witchy Wonderland is the like Christmassy compendium of stories about each of these characters plus some extra ones. I fell in love with this series this year. I will reread all of these books a lot. I can't wait for the rest of the series. The next one's coming out in June. It's called Practice Safe Hex. I'll give you just a really quick rundown on each book. In Wolf Gone Wild, we have Evie, who's the first Savoy sister we meet, who is a hexbreaker, and Mateo, who is a werewolf who has a curse on him and he can't shift. Wonderful. Book 2, we have Isadora, the next Savoy sister, and she's like a healer, like sunshine type of witch, and Devraj, who is a vampire assassin. And they have the best meet cute I've ever seen because she is riding her bike home and he hits her with his car. And she is okay, but it is hilarious and wonderful. Third, we have Witches Get Stitches, which is Nico and Violet. Nico is Mateo's cousin from the first book, and he is also a werewolf. Violet is kind of the roughest sister. She's a tattoo artist, and she's like a little bit more spunky than the other ones we've met so far. They had met a few years earlier in Austin and had like a quick hookup. So Nico knows that she's his soulmate, but she doesn't know. And he's just waiting and waiting for her to come around to him. And it's so good. I think this one is my favorite of the whole series. It's hard to say, I love them all. And lastly, Walking in a Witchy Wonderland is like 3 extended epilogues for the first 3 books I talked about, plus a prologue to the next book, which is the sister Livy and her mate Gareth, who is a Grimm. And then there is a novella in here about 2 side characters who work with the Savoy sisters named JJ and Charlie, which is an absolute delightful read, and I really recommend reading it. Even if you're not like super in the Christmas spirit, it's very like pagan-y rather than Christmassy, so if you were looking just for like a wintry magic story, it's fantastic. Those are my favorite romances of the year. I would say that it's a really close tie between the entire Stay a Spell series and The Lady Gets Lucky as my favorite reads of the year. They were both fantastic. Check back in a few days and I'll have my other genre reads up. I hope you're having a wonderful day and that you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. Bye.